What's up, guys? It is Sam here, and tonight we have an epic battle, as you can see here, between these candidates, and we are going to be fighting in 3 different battles. We're going to stack rank each one of these candidates on these 3 factors. The percentage of donors made up of donations of $200 or less. We're going to define $200 or less donors as small donors versus, say, donations of several thousands of dollars. The factor number 2 is the sheer number of donors, male and female. And I have a little bit of a tidbit to share with you in a minute on number 2. That's why I have that one starred. Savings rate. So if I forget to mention it in the video, make sure somebody leave a comment down below, and I will leave it in the comment section. Savings rate. Savings rate we're going to define as the unspent balance at the end of a reporting period. So campaign fundraising has to be reported, and that is where I'm gathering this data. So I think the last reporting date was August 2019, August 1st, 2019, according to opensource.org, I think it is. So, and that's going to be divided by the total amount of money raised. And why do I think now, for the savings rate, how are we going to stack rank that? What are we going to say? A high savings rate is a good thing? Or are we going to say a low savings rate is a good thing? And I made the argument in the first video I did on this series that having a low savings rate is more indicative of where I believe a campaign is going. Because if you're not number one, say I could think somebody in Joe Biden's party thinking that they have it locked up, so they have a higher savings rate because they're not trying as hard and pushing, because it takes effort to figure out how to spend money effectively to get results. Like, it's not just you have all this money you dump into it. It takes a lot of work to spend money in an effective way that gets a positive ROI on the campaign's objectives. So I believe having a lower savings rate is better in the sense that they're working harder to spend the money. Whereas if you have, 50% savings rate, I don't see that as a good thing if you are trying to win. Like, it's unless you're way, way, way ahead of the pack, I think your savings rate should probably be a little bit lower. Unless I'm missing something you can let me know down below in the comments. But unless I'm missing something, a low savings rate means, to me, that somebody's probably trying a little bit harder and pushing a little bit more. There's a higher risk taking if you have a lower savings rate, because then what if you don't raise as much money next month, right? So I think a low savings rate is a good thing, and that's how we're going to define the number 1 spot for the savings rate. The sheer number of donors is pretty self-explanatory. The highest number of donors is number 1. And the percentage of donors made up of less than $200, representing small donors, highest percentage made up of small donors, we are going to say is indicative of the interest involved. And if you have more small donors interest involved, I think that's more representative of what the country is interested in, right? If it's coming from the masses, right? People donating less than $200, I think that says something more about the relevance of these players. Now, that is all coming up next. Before I get into any of that, if this is your first time here, what's up? My name is Sam, and if you're a returning viewer, it's good to freaking see you. So, with that being said, let's jump over to give a little bit of macro before we dive really into the micro here. So, what is the donor ranking? Like, what the fuck is that, Sam? You just fucking made that shit up. Well, yes, I did just make that shit up. But what we're trying to do here is take some very objective data as a sense of polling the nation to see what the collective of the nation here in the U.S. is thinking about these candidates. versus the traditional way we have polling set up, where you might get several hundred or several thousand people who give some type of opinion about something, and using that as the metric of relevance for who the collective of the country is interested in, I think one has a much more, I mean, it's 2019, and I think to say that was probably very effective in the past, but we're at a different point in time where we can find some things done a lot more effectively by taking a look at some of the data. In my opinion, you can let me know down below in the comments. So what donor ranking is one of 7 different factors that we are using in that data to come up with our power rankings for the Democratic candidate presidential race. And then we can compare this to what the polling data says. So this is number 7. Number 1 was Google search volume for each of these candidates' names over different periods of time. Same thing with YouTube. Then we took a look at their individual websites, and we looked at their ranking within the U.S. out of all websites in the U.S. to understand of the popularity of their website, because that also, in my opinion, has a positive, I would say, affinity to relating to the masses, right? Because you just have a sheer higher volume of people coming to your website. And we did some rankings on some factors in there. And then we went through and looked at a little bit of social to look at their growth rates and whatnot. And lastly, we came into the donations section, which is this video. And I apologize, it has been so long since the lead up of this video, but thumbs up for that. Let's jump into it. Okay, so here we have the 10 candidates. These are the players over here. And we're taking a look over here at the percentage of donations that they've raised from small donors, as defined earlier as donations of less than $200. Okay, let's take a look here. I've just highlighted who is number 1, which is Andrew Yang. He's got 66 plus % from small donors. Bernie Sanders is pretty high as well. So is Julian Castro. And they're tied actually for 2nd place. Then we jump up to Beto. Then we jump up to Beto here in 4th. And Pete in 5th. I do an interesting thing here that I just learned as I was doing a little bit of research for the video. I don't really know anything about any of these candidates, or very little about these candidates in general, or what they even stand for, or their policies. I'm literally just looking into the data because I find it super interesting to me. And as I was pulling up each one of these candidates on the first page of opensource.org, it mentions that Pete is the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, 37-year-old Navy veteran, openly gay Democrat to run for president. I thought that was kind of cool. But that would also, just hearing that information, if it is factual, would indicate that, in my opinion, Pete would probably have maybe a higher percentage from small donors, because I don't know how he relates to that community or not, but I feel like that community could be very impactful in the sense that generally speaking, if you look at some of the finance data, people in that community have more discretionary income, whether it's because they focus on their career or their income, or that they don't have the traditional sense of a spouse that is all supported by the other partner. So if you look at some of the data, that's interesting. I would have expected his to be a little bit higher, actually. But when we take a look at the ranking overall, the next category that I wanted to take a look at was the total number of donors in their placing. So let's take a look at this here. You guys can, take a look real quick as I pull up this next one. And on this one here, this is the placing for the donors. What we can see here is that Andrew Yang actually has almost the worst, or towards the very bottom, in terms of sheer number of donors. He's 7th. Bernie Sanders is number 2. He has almost 700,000. That's tremendous. I hope that this is just from this election and it's not the collective from the last election, but I am not 100% sure. But given that some of these other people didn't run last time and they still have a couple 100,000, I think it is probably from this one, which, I mean, that's a lot of people to give money, right? So that is why in the overall ranking of donors, the total number of donors that we have in these categories, I actually ranked that, or weighted that as a 50% relevance factor. So when we take the average of the savings rate, the donors, the total number of donors, and the percentage of the small, we have the percentage from small as 25% of our average. We have the savings rate as 25% of our average, with the middle here representing 50% of the average, if any of this is making sense. Number 2, we have Elizabeth Warren, probably a pretty well-known name. Number 3 is Pete, which is kind of interesting. As I just mentioned, he does have a lot of donors, and I did not even think about saying any of that until like this video went live. So that was actually kind of interesting. He's number 3 there. Elizabeth Warren, I feel like, has a lot of name recognition, so that's helping her out. Plus, she's female too, so I think some people really want a female for president. Next, we have Kamala Harris, and she's at number 4. Joe Biden at number 5. Joe Biden, step it up, sonny. Everybody's ranking you so high, and you're ranked number 5th in terms of donors, right? Thumbs up for that. Next, let's take a look at the savings rate here. And I'm trying to do this while still fairly concealing the information underneath it, because that gave the ranking for the whole category, which you may have saw earlier, but I'm trying not to spoil it for anybody who wants to wait to the end. Okay, so let's take a look at the savings rate based upon the name of the candidate. Let's see here. I mean, as we defined earlier, the amount they have left over at the end of the reporting period divided by how much they've raised in total. And I did not look at this data when I first put out the definition of what I was going to be looking at. That was, you can go watch that video. That was before I looked at any of this data to see that Andrew Yang's savings rate, or in my opinion, the amount of effort you put in to something like this, because even if you just want to dump it into ads, to do effective ads online, you have to at least have some type of modicum understanding of what the fuck you're doing. Like I've run ads, and I've run them multiple different times, probably several $100s worth. I think probably $500 to $600 worth of ads, and I still don't even feel like I have a slight grasp, and mine is like a lot deeper than most people. So to be able to run effective ads, I mean, you need a team of people, you know. So that is kind of interesting. Then rounding up the top 5, we have Julian, who has a 25% savings rate. Beto has a 33%. Cory Booker has a 39.7. Number 5 is Joe Biden. So Joe Biden's the only person who I could kind of be like, yeah, I could see how they could make that decision, because if he's saving 46% of what he's raised, or every dollar he raises, he saves 46 cents of it, I could see his camp thinking that they have it in the bag and not really going all out now. But for everybody else, like Pete, the mayor guy, I don't understand why his is so high, unless these candidates know they can lose and then they get to somehow keep the donations. I have no idea how this works. Somebody who knows this information, I would love to know down below in the comments. But what happens to like all these millions of dollars when all 9 of these other fucking people drop out? Whoever it is that comes across as the winner, right? Like the Pete dude's rates $33 million. Like what happens? After these people drop out and there's still several $1,000,000 that they've raised, do they get to keep it? Do they get to use it in some way or benefit themselves in some way so it shows it's legal? I don't know. Be interesting to know if somebody has the answer to that. The next one here, and I'm just going to move this out of the way to show you. As you can see here, I've highlighted the 2 people in number 1 and 2. And we've got number 1 is Bernie Sanders. So let me show you what this is. As I just talked about earlier, we've got 25% coming from the small donor placing, 50% coming from the placing on the sheer number of donors, because I think that has a little bit more relevance than some of these other 2 factors. You can let me know what your thoughts are. Yes, arbitrary, but I feel the intuition tells me that. You can bet on that. Well, I guess we'll see. But the next one is the savings rate, as we just went over, and that is represented by 25%. Also, quickly on the savings rate, you can really see who's hustling here, which is like the smaller people in terms of relevance. They're like trying to spend it as quickly as possible, as effectively as possible, to see about like, fuck, I'm like Beto O'Rourke, like, shit, I need to spend more money to get more relevance to, I mean, like, honestly, dude, I don't know, some of these other people you wonder, I don't know, at what point will they be dropping out? But it will be interesting to see. I mean, put yourself in the thick of it, I guess, to understand how these people, might be. An interesting tidbit that I did want to touch on before I start wrapping this up is that the percentage of male to female donors, and this is just a tidbit I found very interesting, especially given what we know about Pete as mayor, that Andrew Yang has a much higher percentage of male donors than any other candidate. So I've pulled it up here in the background, and if we look at, where is it? Contributors, I think it is down, donor demo. He's got 73% from men. His sheer number's not that high, but that, I don't know, that's kind of interesting, but it also goes along with the impact that I'm having on my YouTube channel is primarily from men watching, and men have a higher tendency to watch YouTube videos than women. So that is kind of interesting. I found that. We'll see how that plays out, because I feel like that could be a benefit in the sense that if somebody truly is able to relate to a specific large portion of the population, but not like be wishy-washy on just so many fucking things, I think that's going to have a lot of appeal to the people that they don't relate to, from the sense that, wow, this guy's actually being honest and he's not trying to pander to me, even though he doesn't fucking understand what I want. So that is very, very interesting, because it's so much higher than everybody else. I think the next closest person is 60%, which is, you know what I mean, that's just substantially higher than everybody else. And let me know what your thoughts are on that little bit down below in the comments. On the way down there, if you press that subscribe button, you'll be able to see the power ranking when that comes out, and that's going to be the average of all those factors. So press that bell button as well, because then YouTube will notify you when that video comes out. It should be out tomorrow. If you have any thoughts on what I'm doing and you don't want to leave it down below in the comments, jump over to Instagram. There's a link in the description and say what's up. Thank you so much for watching.